Dr. Maya Johnson stood in front of the large conference room mirror, adjusting her blazer for the umpteenth time. The fabric felt somewhat stiff against her skin, a far cry from the comfort of her lab coat. Today was not just any day. It was the day she would present her groundbreaking research at the prestigious American Medical Association conference. The stakes were high, and she could feel the weight of expectations bearing down on her shoulders. In her reflection, she saw not just a scientist, but a trailblazer in a field that had certainly not made it easy for someone like her, a brilliant black woman, to rise to prominence. "Are you ready?" asked Dr. Evelyn Moore, her mentor and a revered figure in the medical community, who had been with Maya every step of the way. Evelyn's warm smile and steady gaze radiated encouragement. She was a beacon of support in a world that often seemed dim. "I think so," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've practiced so many times, but what if they just don't get it? What if they dismiss me because of, well, you know?" Evelyn stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "You've worked hard for this, Maya. Your research is groundbreaking. Don't let anyone's bias dim the brilliance of your work. Remember, you're not just presenting data. You're challenging and advancing our understanding of cardiovascular health. Focus on that." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I just wish the audience would see me for my work and not just my race or gender. Keep your head high and remember that you're not alone in this. I believe in you," Evelyn said, squeezing her shoulder gently before stepping back to give Maya space. As the time approached for her presentation, Maya's heart raced. She gathered her notes and walked toward the conference hall, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She imagined the audience, composed of seasoned professionals, some of whom had openly questioned her work in the past. Among them was Dr. Samuel Price, a prominent researcher with a reputation for arrogance and a history of dismissing the contributions of women and minorities in science. Maya took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage, her palms slick with sweat as she adjusted the microphone. The room was filled with an expectant silence, the faces of her peers scrutinizing her every move. She cleared her throat and began her presentation. "Good morning, everyone. Today, I am excited to share my research on a new treatment for cardiovascular diseases," she stated, her voice steadier than she felt. "This approach challenges long-standing assumptions and offers a novel solution to a condition that affects millions." As she delved into her findings, she could see some audience members leaning forward, intrigued. But then she spotted Dr. Price, his arms crossed and a smirk playing on his lips. It was a look of skepticism, one that made her stomach churn. With every word, she felt the disapproval radiating from him, a prickling sensation that made her question whether she truly belonged in this space. "While your data is interesting, Dr. Johnson, I would argue that it lacks significant clinical relevance," Dr. Price interjected mockingly. The room fell silent. The air was thick with tension. We've seen similar claims before that ultimately led to false hope. Her course through Maya. She had poured her heart and soul into this research, and to have it dismissed so flippantly stung more than she could express. "Dr. Price," she managed, fighting to keep her voice steady, "my research is built on years of rigorous testing and collaboration with leading experts in the field. It addresses a critical gap in our understanding of cardiovascular health, particularly among populations that are often overlooked in clinical studies." Dr. Price leaned back, a smug expression on his face. "The validity of your work remains questionable, and I believe the audience deserves to hear from those with proven track records." His words hung in the air, heavy with condescension. Maya's heart sank, and as she wrapped up her presentation, the applause felt distant and hollow. She stepped off the stage with her head held high, but inside, she was crushed. The laughter and whispers that followed her exit only deepened the wound. She had hoped that this moment would mark a turning point in her career, but instead, it felt like a setback, a stark reminder of the biases that still plague the scientific community. As she walked toward the exit, her mind raced with thoughts of doubt and determination. Dr. Price's words echoed in her head, igniting a fierce resolve. She would not allow this to be the end of her story. She would find a way to prove him wrong and showcase the importance of her research. Maya sat in the dimly lit corner of the cafe, her fingers nervously tapping on the table. The weight of the world felt heavy on her shoulders, and she couldn't shake off the sting of humiliation from her presentation. The bustling sounds of the conference faded into a dull roar as she stared out the window, lost in thought. Just then, Dr. Evelyn Moore approached her table, her presence radiating warmth and understanding. "Maya," Dr. Moore said softly, taking a seat across from her. "You look like you've just faced a hurricane." Maya forced a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. More like a storm of skepticism. "I thought my research could make a difference, but Dr. Price and the others dismissed it so easily." Dr. Moore leaned in, her expression serious. "I've been there, you know. When I first presented my findings on genetic markers in breast cancer, I was met with the same kind of disdain. They said I was overstepping, that my data was flawed because I was a woman of color. It stings, doesn't it?" Maya looked up, meeting her mentor's gaze. "How did you handle it?" "I leaned into my work," Dr. Moore replied, her voice steady. "I gathered more data, collaborated with others who believed in me, and eventually, I proved them wrong. It's not just about the research, it's about resilience. You have to let that fire inside you fuel your determination." Maya felt a flicker of hope rise in her chest. "But what if they never accept me? What if Dr. Price continues to undermine my work?" Dr. Moore reached across the table, placing her hand over Maya's. "You're not alone in this. And remember, your research is groundbreaking. You're challenging long-held assumptions, and that's what science is meant to do. Keep pushing forward. The truth will prevail." With Dr. Moore's words echoing in her mind, Maya returned to her lab, determined to validate her findings. She spent hours poring over her data, her hands moving deftly between her notes and the computer. The sterile smell of the lab, once intimidating, now felt like a sanctuary. Each experiment she conducted brought her closer to proving the legitimacy of her research. But as she delved deeper, the isolation became palpable. Colleagues who once greeted her in the hallways now averted their eyes, whispers trailing behind them like shadows. "Did you hear about her presentation?" one would say, and the other would respond with a snicker. What a waste of time. Maya felt the sting of their words, yet she pressed on, determined not to let their ignorance derail her mission. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Maya sat in front of her computer, reviewing Dr. Price's published work. The familiar sense of frustration bubbled within her as she looked over his data. It was meticulous, but something caught her eye, a discrepancy in the methodology that could potentially undermine the entire study. Her heart raced as she dug deeper, confirming her suspicions. Could this really be true? She whispered to herself, her mind racing with the implications. The thought of using this information against Dr. Price tempted her. But another part of her hesitated. She didn't want to stoop to his level. She wanted to prove her worth through her own research, not by bringing someone else down. As she sat there, torn between her moral compass and the desire for justice, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Moore. "Remember, Maya, you have the power to change the narrative. Stay focused on your work. The truth will shine through." Maya took a deep breath, seeking clarity. She had been given the opportunity to make a significant impact in her field, and she knew that succumbing to Dr. Price's tactics would only divert her from her ultimate goal. She decided then that her energy would be spent on her own research, the one that could save lives and change the landscape of cardiovascular treatment. With renewed resolve, she returned to her experiments, pushing aside the temptation to sabotage Dr. Price. She would focus on her path, and if the truth about his misconduct came to light organically, then so be it. For now, her priority was to ensure that her groundbreaking work was seen for what it truly was, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in doubt and discrimination. Maya sat at her lab bench, staring at the data on her screen, but her mind was elsewhere. The moment she had stepped off the stage at the American Medical Association conference, a dull ache had settled in her chest. Dr. Samuel Price's dismissive remarks echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the disbelief she faced. But it wasn't just the professional setback that weighed on her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. It was a message from her brother, a brief note that sent a chill through her. "Mom's not doing well. We need to talk." With a heavy heart, Maya closed her laptop and took a deep breath, knowing she needed to step away from her research. The drive to her family home felt longer than usual, the autumn trees blurring into a tapestry of gold and brown. When she arrived, the familiar warmth of her childhood home was replaced by an unsettling silence. Her brother, Daniel, greeted her at the door, his expression grave. "Maya, thank you for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom's been in and out of the hospital. The doctors are worried." Maya felt her heart sink. Their mother had always been the pillar of strength in their family, the one who had encouraged them to chase their dreams no matter the obstacles. Now, seeing the weight of illness on her mother's face was almost too much to bear. "Where is she?" Maya asked, urgency propelling her forward. "In the living room," Daniel replied, leading her through the dimly lit house. As Maya entered, she found her mother lying on the couch, a frail figure wrapped in a blanket. The sight broke her heart. "Mom," she called softly, kneeling beside her. Her mother's eyes flickered open, and a faint smile spread across her lips. "Maya, sweetie, I'm glad you're here," her mother said, her voice hoarse. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm here now. How are you feeling?" "I'm okay, just tired," her mother said, reaching for her hand. "I've been thinking about you and your work. How did the presentation go?" Maya hesitated, the sting of her recent failure surfacing again. "It didn't go as planned, Mom," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Oh, honey, don't let that get you down. You're doing incredible things, and sometimes people just can't see it," her mother replied, her eyes shining with encouragement. "You've always been so passionate. Don't lose that fire." Maya felt a surge of determination. Her mother's belief in her lit a spark that had been dimmed by doubt. "I won't. I just need to figure out my next steps," she said, squeezing her mother's hand tightly. Later that night, after spending hours catching up and sharing laughter that felt like a balm for her soul, Maya returned to her apartment. The comfort of her family had reignited her passion, and she felt ready to dive back into her work. She sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face. As she sifted through her experimental data, something caught her eye, a pattern she hadn't noticed before. Heart racing, she leaned closer to the screen. The results were significant, revealing a potential breakthrough in her research. This was it. It was the light at the end of a long tunnel. "Maya, are you still working?" Dr. Moore's voice broke through her concentration, startling her. Maya turned to see her mentor standing in the doorway, a warm smile on her face. "I found something," Maya said, her excitement bubbling over. "I think I'm onto something that could change the way we approach cardiovascular treatment." Dr. Moore stepped into the room, her expression shifting to one of keen interest. "Show me," she urged, leaning over Maya's shoulder as she pulled up the latest findings. As Maya explained her discoveries, she could feel the passion radiating from her. Dr. Moore's eyes widened with each new point Maya made. "This is impressive, Maya. You have the potential to revolutionize this field." Maya felt her heart swell with pride. "But I need funding to continue," she said, the weight of reality settling in. "Without financial support, I won't be able to take this further." Dr. Moore nodded thoughtfully. "We'll figure it out. You've got something valuable, and we can't let it slip away. Let's start reaching out to potential sponsors and grants." Don't lose hope. Fueled by her mother's strength and Dr. Moore's unwavering support, Maya set her sights on the challenges ahead. She knew the road would be difficult, but she was determined to see her research through. It was her time to shine, to prove not just to Dr. Price, but to herself and the world that her work mattered and that her voice deserved to be heard. Dr. Maya Johnson sat at a long, polished table in a dimly lit conference room, her heart racing as she prepared to present her funding proposal to a panel of stern-faced reviewers. The air was thick with skepticism, and as she glanced around the room, she could sense the prejudices lurking beneath the surface. The panel was composed mostly of older, white men, their expressions unreadable as they shuffled through her meticulously crafted documents. She took a deep breath, recalling Dr. Moore's advice to speak with confidence, to own her narrative. "Thank you for having me," Maya began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Today, I will present my research on a groundbreaking treatment for cardiovascular diseases, which I believe has the potential to save countless lives." As she spoke, she noticed Dr. Richard, the oldest member of the panel, whispering to his colleague, a smirk playing on his lips. She fought the urge to flinch, pushing through the unease to illustrate her findings with clarity and conviction. "My research challenges long-standing assumptions in the field and demonstrates a novel approach that could significantly improve patient outcomes." "Interesting," Dr. Richard interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "But isn't it true that your methodology has been questioned by several prominent researchers in the field?" Maya's heart sank. "I believe those concerns stem from a misunderstanding of the data," she replied, maintaining her composure. "I have conducted extensive trials and peer-reviewed studies that support my findings." "Extensive, you say? Some might argue that the sample size was rather limited," he retorted, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed. The smirk had transformed into a full-blown smile, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was inflicting. Maya's mind raced, searching for a way to counter his skepticism. "The sample was indeed smaller than ideal, but it was statistically significant, and further funding would allow me to expand the study," she replied, her voice firm. "This research could lead to a revolutionary treatment." The panel exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. Maya felt a knot tightening in her stomach as she concluded her presentation. "I appreciate your time and consideration," she said, forcing a smile as she gathered her notes. She sensed the weight of their dismissive gazes upon her as she exited the room, her heart heavy with disappointment. Later that day, she found herself wandering through the hallways of the conference center, feeling defeated. Just then, she spotted Dr. Moore, her mentor, approaching with a concerned look on her face. "Maya, how did it go?" she asked, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "Not great," Maya admitted, her voice trembling. "They dismissed my research without even considering its potential. It's as if they see me, not my work." Dr. Moore's expression softened. I faced similar challenges early in my career. It's disheartening, but it's not a reflection of your abilities. We have to keep pushing forward." Maya nodded, grateful for her mentor's unwavering support. "I want to prove them wrong, to show them that my research matters," she said, her determination rekindling. As she turned a corner, a flicker of hope caught her eye. A poster on the wall advertised a prestigious grant opportunity that required a mentor's endorsement. Her heart raced with the possibility. "Dr. Moore, what if I applied for this grant? Would you be willing to mentor me through the process?" Dr. Moore's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. I'd be honored to support you," she replied enthusiastically. "This could be your chance to secure the funding and recognition you deserve." With renewed determination, Maya dove into the application process. She worked tirelessly, pouring her heart and soul into the proposal, meticulously outlining her research and its implications. As she finalized the document, she felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was her moment, her opportunity to rise above the doubts cast upon her. However, unbeknownst to Maya, Dr. Price had caught wind of her ambitions. In the shadows, he began to weave a web of deception, spreading false rumors about her work to undermine her credibility. Maya remained blissfully unaware as she submitted her proposal, her heart filled with hope for the future. As the days passed, she awaited a response from the grant committee, her anticipation mingled with anxiety. She had fought through so much, and this grant represented not just funding, but validation of her worth as a scientist. Little did she know, the battle was far from over. Dark clouds loomed on the horizon, threatening to overshadow her hard-fought progress. Maya Johnson sat at her cluttered desk, the glow of her computer screen casting a pale light over the stacks of papers and research notes that surrounded her. The rejection email from the funding board still stung, the words "unfounded claims" echoing in her mind like a cruel taunt. Just as she was about to succumb to despair, her phone rang, the sound piercing the silence of her lab. "Hello, Dr. Johnson?" A bright voice chimed on the other end. Yes, this is Maya, she replied cautiously, her heart racing. We're from Biotech Innovations. We heard about your recent presentation at the American Medical Association conference, and we're very interested in your research on cardiovascular treatment. Can we set up a meeting to discuss this further? Maya could hardly believe what she was hearing. The disappointment of the day melted away, replaced by a flicker of hope. Absolutely. When would you like to meet? Would tomorrow at 10 work for you? Yes, that would be perfect, she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. After they exchanged details, she hung up, a smile breaking across her face. Maybe this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The next day, Maya arrived at Biotech Innovations, a sleek building that contrasted sharply with the cramped confines of her lab. As she walked through the glass doors, she felt a surge of confidence. She was here to prove herself, to show that her research had merit beyond the biases she had faced. Inside, she was greeted by a team of enthusiastic scientists and executives. Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming, said Jenna, the lead researcher, extending her hand. We're excited to hear more about your work. Maya took a deep breath, ready to present her findings. Thank you for having me. I believe my research on the new treatment for cardiovascular diseases could revolutionize how we approach heart health. As she spoke, the room filled with a palpable energy. The team was engaged, nodding in understanding and excitement. Maya shared her data, the rigorous methods she employed, and the groundbreaking results she had obtained. Your approach is innovative, one of the scientists remarked. We've been looking for new ways to address these issues. Your findings could align perfectly with our goals. The meeting continued with an exchange of ideas, and by the end, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. We can offer you the resources you need to bring your research to the next level, Jenna said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Let's work together to make this happen. As Maya left the meeting, her heart soared. She had not only secured funding, but also a team that believed in her vision. The obstacles she had faced seemed less daunting now. She was on the cusp of something significant. Just as she was about to leave the building, her phone buzzed with a notification that made her stop in her tracks. An anonymous message had come through. With trembling hands, she opened it. Maya, you need to know about Dr. Price. He's been manipulating data in his studies to gain favor. If you look closely at his recent publications, you'll find discrepancies. Maya's mind raced. The weight of the information settled heavily on her. Could it be true? The very man who had dismissed her research and attempted to sabotage her career was himself engaged in unethical practices? Her heart pounded in her chest as she considered the implications. Taking a deep breath, she realized that she had a choice to make. She could expose Dr. Price's misconduct, but at what cost? What if it backfired? But then again, how many others had faced the same discrimination and disbelief she had? She thought of the countless women and minorities in science who had been silenced or overlooked. Determined, Maya decided she would investigate further. She would gather evidence, ensure it was concrete, and then make her decision. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. With her newfound opportunity and the weight of Dr. Price's potential downfall looming, she felt a fire ignite within her. She was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for the integrity of science itself. In the days that followed, Maya immersed herself in her research while discreetly gathering information on Dr. Price's published work. She wasn't just discovering her own path. She was preparing to dismantle the barriers that had held her back for too long. As she delved deeper, she felt the thrill of possibilities surge through her, like the electric pulse of a heartbeat restored. Maya Johnson stood at the front of the conference room, her heart pounding in her chest, as she prepared to present her findings to the National Committee investigating ethical violations in research. She could feel the weight of scrutiny from the committee members, each of their gazes heavy with skepticism, particularly Dr. Samuel Price, who sat with an air of arrogant confidence. The room buzzed with tension, a palpable mix of anticipation and apprehension. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the journey that had led her here. The countless late nights in the lab, the sacrifices she had made, and the resilience she had cultivated. "Thank you for allowing me to present today," Maya began, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. I am here to discuss significant ethical concerns surrounding Dr. Price's research and the impact it has had on my work in the field of cardiovascular treatment. Dr. Price leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. What a bold claim, Dr. Johnson. It's interesting how you're trying to shift the focus from your own shortcomings to my career, he retorted, his tone dripping with condescension. Maya felt a surge of anger, but maintained her composure. I am not here to disparage you, Dr. Price. I have evidence that shows the manipulation of data in your studies, which compromises the integrity of your research and has far-reaching implications for patient care. She presented her findings, laying out the discrepancies in his data with precision. The committee members exchanged glances, some visibly intrigued, while others appeared skeptical. Dr. Price's expression shifted from smugness to irritation. This is preposterous. You are grasping at straws to validate your own failed experiments, Maya. It's common practice to refine data, not manipulate it. Refining data is one thing, but what I have here shows a systematic alteration of results. Maya countered, her voice gaining strength. I've documented instances where you've excluded critical patient data to achieve favorable outcomes. This is not just a matter of scientific integrity. It is a matter of patient safety. The atmosphere in the room thickened as Maya continued, detailing the specific studies in question and the implications of Dr. Price's actions. She could see some of the committee members leaning in, their interest piqued. I also have testimonies from colleagues who witnessed your attempts to undermine my work, she added, her resolve firm. You've sought to discredit my research at every turn, attempting to prevent me from receiving funding and recognition for my groundbreaking work. Dr. Price's face flushed with anger. You are accusing me of a personal vendetta? This is utterly ridiculous. You are a junior researcher trying to make a name for yourself by slandering established scientists. Maya stood tall, feeling the weight of her truth behind her. I am not here to slander. I am here to uphold the values of science and ensure that our field remains untainted by unethical practices. Your reputation may be built on deception, but I refuse to stand idly by while you continue to harm patients and ruin careers. The room fell silent, the gravity of her words hanging in the air. Finally, one of the senior committee members, Dr. Elena Martinez, broke the silence. Dr. Price, we will need to investigate these claims thoroughly. If what Dr. Johnson is saying holds merit, it poses serious ethical implications for your work and the trust placed in you by the medical community. As the committee proceeded with their inquiries, Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time, she felt as if her voice was being heard. With each question directed at Dr. Price, she could see the cracks in his facade growing wider. In a dramatic twist, as Maya presented further evidence, it became clear that Dr. Price's arrogance had led to his own downfall. He was cornered, struggling to maintain his composure as the weight of his unethical actions bore down on him. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the committee reached their verdict. Dr. Price, based on the findings presented, we find you guilty of scientific misconduct. You are hereby suspended from your position, pending further investigation. As the news sank in, Maya felt a rush of triumph. The committee's decision solidified her place in the scientific community, and her groundbreaking research gained national attention. With newfound support and funding, she could continue her work, transforming her vision for cardiovascular treatment into reality. Maya stood proud, not just for herself, but for every individual who had faced discrimination and doubt in their pursuit of knowledge. She had turned adversity into triumph, becoming a beacon of resilience and inspiration for countless others. As she left the room, she could feel the weight of systemic bias lifting, replaced by hope for a more equitable future in science.